What am I doing? I'm talking to an empty telephone.
I don't understand.
Because there was a dead man on the other end of this fucking line.
I believe in two things, discipline and the Bible. Here you'll receive both. Put your trust in the Lord. Your ass belongs to me. Welcome to Corona Cinema. In these trying times where everything's shut down, including movie theatres, we decided to create our own virtual cinema and screen 4 films each week based around a particular theme. This week, commemorating his 83rd birthday, we're doing Morgan Freeman movies. Now playing $1 Million Baby, The Shawshank Redemption, Se7en, and Unforgiven. Get busy living or get busy podcasting. I'm your host, Liam Way, and I'm joined as always by Ross.
Hello.
May.
Good afternoon.
And Mason.
You all right?
And we're going to start with Ross's pick this week, which is $1 Million Baby from 2004. A determined woman works with a hardened boxing trainer to become a professional. Very, very brief one there. Directed by Clint Eastwood, and it's his 90th birthday, the day of recording as well, incidentally, and written by Paul Haggis. Eastwood stars alongside Best Actress winner Hilary Swank and Best Supporting Actor winner Freeman, with Eastwood losing Best Actor but winning Best Director, and the film took home Best Picture. Ross, why did you pick this film?
So I've never seen the film before, but I've been wanting to watch it for a while. And God, it's one of the Eastwood when he does films, they can really either be hit or miss, but this one's definitely up there with his best. Well, directing films. I mean, yeah, it's Eastwood himself is just ridiculous the way he can just direct and act in this. He does it in one of the other films we can talk about this week as well. But yeah, it's completely different to what I thought it was going to be. That it's really a story about these two people and how their relationship blossoms throughout the film. And with that great twist, I was not expecting that twist. I had no idea that was going to happen. I'd never even thought about that happening. But yeah, the ending's so just like raw and emotional the way it hits you, because obviously he turns the machine off for her in the end after going to the church and whatnot and deciding. But yeah, it's really, really powerful performance from Eastwood to kind of get across his struggles. But I think Hilary Swank just hits the nail on the head with this role. She's perfect for this role, and them two together, it's a really compelling film, like a really, really lovely relationship to watch and a great watch.
Yeah, it's weird because I watched this for the first time a few years ago, and I knew that she ended up like being euthanized. I don't know why. I don't know who spoiled it for me or what, but I knew that going in. And that's in my head that wasn't even like a twist. That was what the plot of the movie was. And trying to remember it before I rewatched it, I thought like the whole second half was literally her in hospital bed. So it's nice to actually get a film where you have like this that's kind of conventional rise like to the top almost that you get in boxing movies, but then twisting it and making a boxing movie where, like, although it's depressing and there's not really much hope in this movie, like to shake up a boxing movie like that, to have her be injured is something different, and not I don't think there's been another boxing movie kind of like that. Mason, was that something refreshing would be the wrong word, but at least something different compared to other boxing films you might have seen in the past?
Yeah, it's weird saying the word refreshing because obviously it's like quite tragic. But it was the first time I watched the film myself, same like Ross, and having that twist, like you said, you don't say refreshing, but it just sort of mixed it up a little bit. Because like as I'm going along, I'm like, oh, this is sick. I felt like I was watching Creed again, especially during like the end boxing scene. And I was like, I was sort of a bit suspicious. I was like, oh, wow, that's gone quick since I've been watching this entire film. Surely it won't end here. And then you get this entire twist, and this must be about like 45 minutes of this whole sequence of her in hospital. And like you said, it felt so unique sort of for that category of film. And it works really well because at first I was like, oh, obviously the film's deep throughout, but I was like, oh, this is like taking a massive turn right now. I don't know if that will sort of suit the film, but it's so important to have that story within the film, because I think it carries it and makes it all that like much more of a stronger film when you get like to the end result. So yeah, it was something that I think you should probably see in more films, but then obviously if it's overdone or if it's done shit, it clearly won't work. But I think this film gets like the perfect blend of how to do it.
Yeah, I like how both characters are kind of like almost over the hill in a sense. Like she's like really old to be trying to become a professional boxer. And like they talk about that as well. So this is kind of her last chance to try and make it. And he's just lost his championship fighter to another trainer.
It is refreshing seeing Hope as something like, because both those characters have been told, oh, you're never really going to get this far in life kind of thing. And then, like you see that with one of the other boxers, Danger. I think it's Danger. And it's kind of like showing contrast between him and her, but they're seen on the same footing. So it's quite refreshing to see that she does make it as far as she does. But this wasn't, unfortunately, the first time I'd seen the film. I'd seen a clip in an RS lesson like 5 years ago or whatever. They showed us literally the only important, they didn't show us any at the start of the film. They just showed her hitting her head in the stool, her neck, and then the whole dilemma afterwards. So I was kind of like watching all of this with just kind of the dread of it happening. And like the films can be shot in the way that they give away that she's in, say, that state at the start, and then it goes back and forward, and that can work quite well. But I think Clint Eastwood sticking to the simplicity of the story works well for this, and I don't think it took away too much. But the message is interesting. I think like something talks about, Morgan Freeman talks about especially, is it's just to live your life and take the risks and take the shots that you can, because you never know when they're going to be taken away. And as he said, like you can break your back like cleaning dishes, or you can do it like taking the shot to make it big. And he says he's sure that the girl has no regrets, and that Clint, the overriding theme of blame, that Clint blaming Morgan Freeman for it, and then coming to that realization. It's a nice character arc for him to go through, because it's almost he's dealing with her injury more than she is. She's almost made up her mind. So that was quite a nice struggle, and I didn't think that they'd actually euthanize her. I thought there might be some kind of rainbow, like at the end of it, they might, because there are films like Bleed for This where he goes through the same thing and he actually makes it all the way back to fighting again. And obviously the extent of her injury is different, but it was, I don't know, it was just interesting how they actually took it down that path and made it okay. And then also the toxicity of the family that she was brought up in. Morgan Freeman talks about earlier on that she was trash and she knew it. And then even when she does like nice things for her family, like huge things like buying them a house, and how that's thrown back at her. And like when they go to see her, they spend like 6 days in Disneyland before they even get to her. And then when they do see her, they bring a lawyer and try and get to sign their money over to her. And it's just like, it was nice to see that she actually managed to escape that family, but she still cared for the family, but she also was able to stand up for herself. So there's lots of factors going in during those scenes. And it was just an interesting watch, and I'm glad I watched it, even though it was relatively depressing.
So this is Morgan Freeman week, and this is one of two collaborations we've got this week. Him and Clint Eastwood. Both times he's playing like the supporting actor to Clint, and also working with him as the director. And this is actually the film that Freeman won his only Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, as I mentioned earlier. But I think probably like his weakest performance, I thought, out of these four films and out of all like his Oscar nominated work. Like he's got this like grizzly voice with a weird eye, like very like he looks tough enough in this boxing gym. You get a sense of his like loneliness, having to sleep in the gym as well. But I don't think it was anything too special. Ross, what did you make of his performance?
I mean, he's not bad in any of the films this week. He's a brilliant in all of them. But I agree with you on the fact, especially Shawshank and Se7en. His acting is so good in those films. Yeah, he won for $1 Million Baby, which I'd say he's more of a side character in this film as well. He's not a side character, as in fact he's not important. Just like the film's so solely focused on Clint Eastwood and Hilary Swank, and them two should obviously be credited for the film. I mean, he is important to the film, but yeah, I'd say Se7en and Shawshank are definitely his strong performances, especially Shawshank Redemption.
I think he served better as a narrator for the film and keeping you updated, and like in keeping with all the characters' thoughts and the progression of the plot. So I think in that terms, it was important to the role or to the film completely. And then also him in the scenes works well, and kind of the side plot where he has to beat up Anthony Mackie, that was quite nice. And then you don't really wonder why he's narrating or what he's talking about until the end, and then it's tied together with the letter to the daughter, and again about bringing it back to taking taking the opportunities while you still can. And yeah, I don't think it's just Morgan Freeman. It's just the way he acts. He's not acting badly. I think it's just down to the direction and whether Clint Eastwood trying to act and direct may take away from the direction that he can provide Morgan Freeman with, or maybe it adds to it because he's in the scene. I'm unsure. But I wouldn't say it's his strongest performance out of the four, but I wouldn't fault it for any reason.
Yeah, I think this is the point where I'll explain that I don't really like this film. Like, it's fine, but I've kind of kept my cards close to my chest. But yeah, you brought up the narration. I thought that was just completely unnecessary, and that's what a lot of movies did after Shawshank. Is just try to shoehorn in narration for Morgan Freeman just because of how iconic his voice is. Like, I thought the narration just kind of punctuated points that didn't really need like any extra input. Like, I think one where when Eastwood's fighter comes to his house and says that he's moving to another trainer, then you have a bit of narration by Freeman, just like he just added like we know what's going on, we can see what's happening, we've got the emotional weight there. I don't think like he needed to throw his 2 cents in at that point as well. And then having the whole thing framed as a letter to the daughter, like I thought it was just bad. Like it doesn't really make sense. Like why would the letter, this daughter probably doesn't even remember who her dad is. Like why is this level of detail about all the fights and stuff going to be in the letter? Like I thought that's a bit of a dumb screenwriting trick. Mason, what did you think of the narration?
Yeah, I do get what you mean. It feels like after Shawshank, everyone sort of tried to jump on that train, especially because he's sort of like known for his voice and stuff like that. Even like you said with the letters, that was the one thing that lost me with the film. I just didn't really understand his relationship with his daughter, what was going on with it, and then with all the letters. And even at the end, it just didn't really seem clear to me. Which, like, obviously it must be clear, but I don't know, it didn't really jump out to me. So I kind of just been left in the dark. I didn't even really feel the need to sort of search as to what it meant. But yeah, like you said with the narration, it sort of feels like they tried a smart idea to add to the film, but almost after they've finished filming it, and they've sort of thought like, oh yeah, we'll just add his narration throughout, we'll add this additional message on top. But like you said, the film could easily do without it and probably be stronger, with it not being there.
In fairness, like, I think I had a bit of prejudice going into the film because I really hate the screenwriter. Like, he's the guy who did Crash, and watching Crash was one of the most infuriating experiences of my life. So I think I'm always going to have baggage with this guy. And he did another film that I watched a couple of weeks ago, which was also just a bit cheesy and a bit he's not very good with subtlety in his writing. And it's a couple of other things I didn't like about the film was the family. I thought they were just like cartoonishly evil, like like go to Disneyland for a week before they come visit their daughter who's in the coma or whatever. I thought they just didn't need to be that. Cause like it's still sad, like when she buys the house for her mum and she's not like grateful in the slightest. She's like still criticizing her, like that's really sad. I thought that worked well. But I thought they just didn't need to be so cartoonishly bad, like going to Disneyland and things like that. And also I didn't like Jay Baruchel, who was like, I think that's Danger. I think that's what his character's name was. Like him as like the comic relief just didn't really work for me. Ross?
Yeah, I wrote something that I found negative about the film at the start when he's like, I don't train girls. There might be, and I didn't realize, but I couldn't really find a reason for him doing that, and he was just being a bit of a dick about it. Like he's just saying, I don't train girls, and there wasn't really any reason for him saying this. And eventually, like, warmed to her, but I think the reason in the first place of him not training her didn't make a load of sense, really.
Well, the film didn't fill me with positivity, but I think it is solidly made. And yeah, I mean, for the majority of people, I don't think there's too much to nitpick from it. And I think also in terms of the family being like cartoonishly evil, I just assumed the mom had some sort of mental illness. Other than that, yeah.
So let's get some ratings for this film. Start with Ross.
I mean, yeah, still a great film. I give it an 8.2.
Matty?
I gave it a 7.7.
Mason?
I think just because how like unique it takes the whole boxing like typical storyline. I gave it an 8. I still think it's like a really good film.
And like Matty, I also gave it a 7.7. Okay, and I will move on to Matty's pick, The Shawshank Redemption from 1994. Two imprisoned men bond over a number of years, finding solace and eventual redemption through acts of common decency. Written and directed by Frank Darabont, starring Tim Robbins and Freeman, nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Freeman, but it won 0. Matty, why did you pick this film?
I think I probably first saw this film nearly 4 years ago, and I haven't rewatched it since. So this was probably the most refreshing rewatch I've had in a long time. And I remember watching it then. It had such a profound effect on me, the ending, how like the resolution of injustice, and how we couldn't quite get the years back, but the way, the manner and the prestige that he did it in really hit home for me. I got literally no film had ever made me feel like that, and I hadn't really got into films properly at that point. And then when I looked at the IMDb, this was around the same time we started the IMDb charts, watching films, and I saw it as the top, and I was like, I fully stood behind that. And more or less I do still, even after now watching the majority of that list. I don't really find too many films that can rightfully beat this. This film is more or less, and it's quite compact as well, getting what it does in, or getting 16 years of film into 2 hours 20. It works really, really well. And again, the powerfulness and the emotiveness of injustice is always something that's really strong. And that's something that Andy goes through the entire film, and he almost just suffers silently. And him also being, he's kind of remarkable in the setting in the prison, that he's highly functioning, a man who's well educated, and it allows him to it's a treat to watch him lay a plan and execute it that he's been planning for the last 16 years, and how it all comes together. And it's you're not really let on until it's already done. And then Morgan Freeman, I think the narration in this film works really well because Andy is such a closed, closeted person. And I think the opening as well is shot really well. It leaves you with enough ambiguity to be intrigued, because we don't know if Andy's done it or not, because we don't actually see that. So that was really nice. So that when we actually learn halfway through the film he didn't do it, I think Andy had more or less accepted his position. And I mean, him being drunk, he never expected anything to come of this. And then when it does, and then for that to be taken away by the warden, just those levels of injustice are just really powerful in filmmaking. And I think lots of films have tried to do this, tried to mimic this, and it doesn't quite work as well as it has here. And the film is just packed full of perfect little moments and perfect quotes, like the beer roof scene, the what's it called, the sequence with Brooks, and how you see that play out plays a message in itself about institutionalization. And then you see that almost play out with Red when he leaves, because the film comes circle again with Red, and if it wasn't for Andy, Red would be in the same place that Brooks would be. And there's all different conflicts between the characters, the conflicts between Red and Andy on the discussion about hope is really interesting. And the film ends with Andy, the message of his letter saying that hope is a good thing. And it's interesting how that affected different characters through the film, trying to keep busy during prison time. And I think probably one of my most favorite quotes from the film is that something was so beautiful that cannot be expressed with words. And I just thought that was just a really nice, when he locked himself in the warden's office and played the music, and that whole sequence, and Andy talking about something that they can't take away from you, was really powerful, and not something that everyone even agreed with. Was quite interesting to see those points of view. And I'm not saying it's necessarily the best film of all time, but you're certainly hard pressed to find something that supersedes it. So it might as well just stay where it is in terms of the rankings. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the opposite of Million Dollar Baby in so many ways for me. Like this is, as you say, like this is the embodiment of hope. Like Andy Dufresne's just trying to find ways to get through his time in prison, and he always believed he was going to find that way to escape. And other ways, it's like the opposite of Million Dollar Baby. I think this is probably the best narration of all time, only rivaled by Goodfellas in my opinion. And I think this is the film that Freeman should have won the Oscar for. And thinking about his narration, like they actually recorded his narration beforehand and then played it on set, which I just find fascinating. I think that's testament to how good it was, that to create this kind of atmosphere on set, they used his narration to do that rather than doing it afterwards, which I thought was interesting. I'm not sure how many other times they've done that for movies. And I think you say this is the #1 film on IMDb. I think that's just testament to how like universally loved this film is. Like I don't know if there's anyone who's like, yeah, fuck Shawshank. Who likes that film? Mason, are you going to be that guy? He says, fuck Shawshank.
No, like even watching it back, like after we sort of got the list of the IMDb top 250, we tried to work through it. And I remember Matty was saying like it is the best film. I tried to watch it today with that in mind, trying to think of it as a bad film, and I was trying to nitpick it as hard as I could. But like we said, it's a testament to the film because I was fucking trying. For 2.5 hours, I tried to find a negative with the film, and I just couldn't find one. I think the film is just so well balanced. It's a really nice full circle film. Every scene works, and for a film that's over 2 hours, it doesn't feel like it. Like there's another film that we watched this week that is quite long, and that felt fucking long. But with Shawshank, it just flows so nicely, and you get sort of like caught up in the film. There's a lot going on, but not a lot to where you're lost. And yeah, like you said, it is hard. I almost wanted to be that guy, to be like, look, it's not the best film ever, but I've been beat.
Yeah, I think another reason why it's so popular is because it's been on TV for so many years. Like it wasn't initially popular at the box office when it first came out. Then they re-released it after it got nominated for a load of Oscars. But then I think it's been on TV in America, from what I've heard from like American podcasters, and then in this country, like ITV4 shows it pretty much every week. So that's another reason why I thought the film was much longer, because obviously you have the adverts as well, so it builds up to like a 3-hour plus program. But it's only 2 hours 20 minutes, and I thought that everything that they pack into that is just like really, it shows how well paced the movie is. And I think it's ideal for TV as well, because it's just kind of just like a collection of like little stories within the prison. Then you have obviously Brooks's bit as well outside of the prison, which Matty talks about, which I thought was really effective, like actually showing him going out of the, like they could have just like cut it off and just said, oh, he committed suicide, institutionalized. He was institutionalized, so he committed suicide. But actually showing us the whole journey, it makes it more effective when Red goes through that journey at the end as well, because you think, oh, maybe he might commit suicide. Obviously, we know how the film ends, but when you first watched it, and I think Tim Robbins as well, he hasn't had like a amazing career. He's never been nominated for an Oscar. I don't know how he wasn't nominated for this film. I thought his performance like really worked. He's got really like contemplative face. Like, you're never quite sure what's going through his head, what he's trying to do. Like that's why you don't actually know if is he plotting an escape. You couldn't really be able to tell from his face. And when you think about some of the other actors who got up for this role, the most funny one for me was Tom Cruise, which would have been extremely bad but kind of fun. It shows how good Robbins was at portraying this character. Ross, is that something you'd agree with on Tim Robbins' performance?
Oh, 100%. He's like the perfect person for this role because he makes the character just so like calm and collected throughout the film, and he just becomes so likable. Like it's when they're all drinking the beer and all he does is has to sit there with that little smirk, and you just like love him for it. Not even like a smirk, it's like a smile, and you just love him for it. And it's just the simplicity, how like simple he makes the role, which makes it so good. Like, and the film itself, I think it's the simplicity of the film and how perfectly paced it is, which makes people love it. Like whether you're a movie lover, you're just an avid movie watcher, you don't really watch films at all, anyone who watches it will love it, and that's why it's so great and why it's up there at the top of IMDb. I mean, I've seen it before and I knew how it ended, but this film, I wish every time I watched it, it was the first time I was watching it, because I want to be, even though this was the second time I watched it, I was still like kind of breathtaking at how like beautiful that ending was, and just that kind of that setting of them on the beach and that slow like pan out, and like seeing the iconic shot of him with his hands up with the light on him, it's just every time I watch it, it's like goosebumps.
Another thing it does really well, I think, is like conveying the passage of time. Like you always you're conscious of how long he's been in there. I feel like normally I don't even know. I feel like every other film, like you're kind of like it's a bit jarring when they say, "Oh, I've been in here for 5 years." Like I watched In the Name of the Father a few weeks ago, and I think that was a 15-year prison sentence. And it's like, just all of a sudden they'll just have a conversation, be like, "Mate, it's been 8 years." And you're like, "What? It's been 8 years?" You never really got a sense of that. Whereas Shawshank, it kind of, I don't know what it is about it, but you kind of always know where you are in this story. And nothing frustrates me like authority obstructing justice. This also happens in the name of the Father. And here with Tommy, so the guy comes in, who he teaches, the one who heard the guy who actually committed the murder of Andy's wife and her lover. Like when he's killed, when that was the opportunity for Andy to just escape without having to break the law to escape. Like having the justice just blocked by the warden. It's so infuriating to watch. Mate, is that a feeling that you can relate to? Just like, oh, come on, man. All you have to do is let him go free. It would have been fine.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most kind of outrageous, like that's the one that fully invests you in the film. How you're like, oh, there's a silver lining of hope. And it's like, it's solid, like it actually checks out. And then it looks like the warden's actually going to help him. And then it just snatches it away and buries it. And then the warden's like, if you were going anywhere before, you're definitely not now. And yeah, it's just really powerful. Another thing I want to say is, wasn't too sure, isn't this cast relatively almost all unknowns, apart from maybe from Morgan Freeman? I don't know if there's something you knew more about.
Relatively, I guess. I think they were a lot. Few of them were in the Green Mile because it's the same director. But yeah, no one's like a household name. Like the Hadley, the main dickhead guard. Like he's been in a few things here and there. He was in Buster Scruggs, and he was that big thing in Ragnarok. But yeah, no one that's like really famous. There were like Oscar nominated people in there.
I think that's another thing as well, that the warden, when people talk about like kind of great movie villains, no one really talks about him, but realistically he actually is. Like he's what's so jarring about this film, but makes it so satisfying as well. And I think he actually does that performance really well, just like everyone else in the film, really. But yeah, as I say, like when you talk about great movie villains, you don't really talk about him, but he really should be up there.
So the reason the warden suggests, the reason that he didn't let Andy go free, or it's like kind of intimated that it's because Andy could reveal that he's been money laundering. Mason, do you think, so say Andy just didn't help with the warden committing these crimes, like he was to serve this time, do you think the warden would have let him free, or do you think he's just a dick, so he would have just stopped it anyway?
I just don't know, because the warden obviously is like a dick, but that's like his peak dickheadness in the film. And that's when you sort of see a turn in his character, where he's like basically just an arsehole throughout after that point. To be honest, I really don't know, because he obviously like portrays himself as this righteous man who's like found God. And you'd obviously believe that if the truth came out in that situation, that's something that he should have to explore and try and help. But then there's sort of hints of where he doesn't actually care throughout the film, to where Andy asks obviously for some money or extra funding for the library, and he says no. Like he kind of just laughs it down and says like, do whatever you want. But then he gives you that little bit of hope. He's like, oh, I'll post your letters for you instead. But when it comes to direct action for him to take on himself, he doesn't do it. He'd rather just sort of pass it on and make it look as though he's helping. So I feel like with that in mind, I doubt that he would actually help in any other sort of instance, really. But what Ross, going back to what Ross was saying as well about wishing you could watch the film again for the first time, I thought it would like take away from the film, because like you said, you have that mystery at the beginning where you're like, oh, did he actually murder his wife? Did he not? And it was so weird, because watching it back in my head, I thought they made that clear from the first instant that he was innocent. But it's not until halfway through you realize that he is actually innocent. So that was quite refreshing to sort of not see that happen until halfway through. And another scene is obviously that you're led to believe that he kills himself in his cell, when he obviously has the rope and stuff like that. And although you do sort of believe that he's trying to escape, you think that that's sort of cracked him and he's going to go like off himself, basically. But then you sort of have this big reveal of him escaping. And that didn't even feel like a disappointment second time round, obviously knowing what happens. You're just so sort of like gassed for him. But the only thing you sort of lose, like I said, is that one scene where they're calling for him to come out of his cell. And you have this fear where you're like, oh my God, like this guy's life is so peak, basically. Because you've seen him sort of like get sort of gassed up slightly and then smash straight down. And then obviously every other character in there has had like a bad fate as well. So you sort of expect that to happen with his character. And that's why I think this film was one of like the first films I watched where I truly brought into the twist. And it feels almost like unique to have such a strong twist that isn't just put there for no reason, but just makes the film sort of 10 times better.
Matt, you mentioned the obscure nature of the cast. Could have had quite a big name in there, a name that features on another film that we're doing this week. Brad Pitt, he actually dropped out for the role of Tommy, the one who gets shot. He dropped out because he was filming True Romance, so could have had a big name in there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is any negatives for this film. Like, you can nitpick the escape if you want to, like the thing with the poster, but it's kind of like no one's thinking about that. If you like I can't think of anyone who comes away is like, how did you get the poster on there? Like, it doesn't really matter in terms of the film. Only thing I would have wanted, I say this to Matty the other day, just like a few more seconds at the end when they're about to embrace. Like the camera, like, because there's a shot of Andy, shot of Red, and then like they're not kind of walking towards each other. I thought you could just like play it on for a few more seconds before the camera goes up and the credits roll. Like, just a few more seconds to get. Don't even need to see them touch. Just wanted to see them a bit closer. That would have given me a bit more satisfaction. But yeah, it's basically a perfect movie. So we can get some ratings. I'll start with Ross. Hold on. I'll start with Matty.
8.8 from me.
Ross?
It's a 9 from me.
Mason?
Yeah, I think there's a reason. Obviously, it's the number one film on IMDb. I gave it a 9.
I also gave it a 9. Interesting. And we'll move on from 9 to 7, which is our third film from 1995. Two detectives, a rookie and a veteran, hunt a serial killer who used the 7 deadly sins as his motives. Directed by David Fincher and written by Andrew Kevin Walker, starring Freeman, Brad Pitt, and Kevin Spacey. Only Oscar nominated for editing, which is a travesty. Mason, why did you pick this film?
So I didn't realize how little like amount of films I'd seen of Morgan Freeman's. So basically, as soon as Shawshank Redemption was picked, I was like, fuck, I have nothing to choose. So I sort of let everyone else sort of advise on what I should pick. And I've never actually seen Se7en, but I'm really glad that I did choose it to watch, because I know it's a film that quite a lot of us, well, not me obviously, but you lot have seen and sort of had gassed up to me. And I was like, oh, is it going to live up to it? But I do think it does. I think I really enjoy the creation of tension within the film through sound, especially within the first half. And I also just enjoy, well, I guess enjoy is the wrong word because it is a bit clapped, but like how you go through each murder, and like you said, you sort of see this whole 7 deadly sins like playing out within the film. I really enjoy the climax of the film. I think that's like a really strong part of it, to where it all comes together. And it's similar to No Country for Old Men. You're literally given this truly like evil guy, basically, who's just outright killing these people. But I think the biggest like fear I had in the film is that when he's explaining himself as to why he kills all these people, you almost understand him for 1 second, and you're like, what he's saying is right. Like, people are so obsessed with themselves, especially like that girl where he offers her, she can call like an ambulance and save her life, or she can kill herself and she chooses to kill herself because she's going to be ugly basically from here on out. And it sort of sends that really strong message of issues within society. And that's what I said. It's so strange, because for a second you're like, he's right, but then you're like, fucking hell, no, he's killing people. Like, it's fucking messed up. I really enjoyed the ending, like I said already, with Brad Pitt's wife's head in a box. I think it's quite fucking crazy. Yeah, no, it all just does work really well. And like I said, I think that's the point where you look at Kevin Spacey as being like truly evil, pretty much. But all in all, no, I really enjoyed the film.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I rewatched it for the first time earlier this year, and I've watched it a few more times since. And like, it's as captivating as like when I first watched it, like even without the twist. So, but I thought it was interesting how much I enjoyed the film without the twist. Like, I thought it was just as interesting without knowing what was going to happen. Ross, is that something you can relate to?
Yeah, because I've seen it quite a few times before, but it's still just great watching Kevin Spacey, because he's just so like perfectly creepy, and like in that last like moment few scenes of the film that he is in. He's just like an absolute scene stealer there. Like he's probably the only person who's like kind of gives you Hannibal Lecter vibes. That kind of performance. But yeah, but even rewatching it, you still kind of have this atmosphere in the film that's kind of, and the tension that you can just cut with a knife throughout the whole thing. But it's also pushed along with that like amazing score that like every time I watch it, I forget how good it actually is. But what I just love about the film as well, though, is just kind of everything that happens to it leads up to this ending, but you don't feel justice or feel satisfied with the ending. But obviously that's the point, that that's why it's so good at the same time. And yeah, it's very different to what a film would normally use as an ending. That's why I like it.
I think what makes it so rewatchable is just like it's just an ingenious screenplay that's just compelling. Like no matter how many times you watch it, and it's created one of my favorite like character dynamics with Somerset and Mills, Morgan Freeman's character, and Brad Pitt. Because you got Somerset, who's like beaten down by the world. His faith is like partially restored by his time with Brad Pitt and Gwyneth Paltrow. Their childhood sweethearts. They're expecting a baby. So in this world of crap, he can see like there's a bit of hope within there. And then you've got Mills, who in the end he ends up getting punished because he's with his wife getting her head chopped off, because he's got this like idealistic desire to like clean up the streets, because he thinks he can just come in, be a good detective, and he'll clean up these streets, when Morgan Freeman's has seen how like depraved it is for so many years. So he's trying to like educate him on the reality of their job. And I like, probably my favorite scene is also maybe like the only funny scene. I think there's a few funny moments, but it's quite a dark movie when he goes around to their house for dinner, and there's the sitting at the dinner table, and then the train comes over, and it shows how naive he actually is. Like he's bought a house under a train line, and this is how naive he is coming into the city thinking he can clean it up. And that's just like exemplified perfectly in that scene, which is also just really funny. The way Morgan Freeman bursts out laughing, like every time it happens, I'm not just sat there genuinely laughing with them as if I'm there. So that's like, yeah, that's my favorite scene in the film. And I like, he has the metronome, the thing by his bed. He has that thing, and he uses that to like drown out the noise of the streets. So he has that at the start of the movie, because at that point he's like ready to give up being a detective, because he's completely done. He doesn't think he can do anything to kind of clean up the streets. So he's apathetic. And then when his hopes like kind of restored by spending time with Brad Pitt and his wife, that's when he's like ready to defend humanity again. So he throws the metronome, throws it across his room, because now he's ready to come out of his like apathetic state. And yeah, so I mentioned before, this kind of relates to some of my personal feelings about like the world, because everything's just fucking shit right now, especially now with the pandemic and with the protests going on in America and even here to an extent. And like, I think it's important, because I was like, this is the only thing that like makes me like depressed, is looking at some of the shitty things going on in the world. But it's also important to stay connected to what's going on, because you need to be conscious of these issues, because that's how you bring down like systemic racism and shit like that. So you can't be what Somerset wanted to be at the start. He just wanted to leave it alone. There's nothing he could do. You've got to stay involved, stay connected, so you can actually bring about some change. So that's how it like relates to me personally, similar to No Country as well, except he had no hope by the end. He was just resigned to the world's just shit, nothing he could do about it. So at least this one has a bit of hope, exemplified by that quote at the end. May, that's my personal feelings in the film. What did you like about the film?
First time I watched this film, I was in school for some reason. I think I watched it in 15-minute segments. And yeah, it hit just as hard then as it still hits now. I think it's a horror film that's real, more or less. And the idea that Kevin Spacey, he's just a man and he's causing this much like anguish and all these crimes is scary. The fact that there's just no higher power coming from him. It's literally just him and his own cravings. And if there was more than one of him, who knows what could happen. The fact that just one person did all this is crazy. And the title sequence as well is really interesting, because it creates that sensation of unease. And I remember the director, he brought in a cinematographer specialist who was known for his perfume ads, because he wanted to make a film that was a black and white film in color. And you kind of the film has this certain vibe to it. Like all the shots are kind of drained of almost color, and the contrast seems to be bumped well up. I think the one thing that you've already touched on as well, I think Mason has as well, is the conviction that Kevin Spacey speaks with at the end. And for the character to only have probably at least 20 minutes of screen time, he absolutely steals the film, and how much he believes in what he is doing. And he's more or less fighting the same fight that Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are. Like he despises apathy. He just hates that people will just look and turn the other way. And he has too much interest and concern for everyone else that he cannot turn away. He has to do something, and he aims to shake people out of the fog of ignoring everything that's going on around them. And it's like they squeeze it in between even the opening scenes and throughout the film. You just hear of little crimes, and people just look the other way. And yeah, Kevin Spacey, he almost goes to the point of having a point, which is kind of scary. And then the message is, you think it's almost bleak, but there is that lining of hope. I think the quote that they used from Ernest Hemingway was really well put, that the world is a fine place. Morgan Freeman says it isn't, but it is worth fighting for. And that is quite interesting. Brad Pitt as well, he works really well in the role, and arguably the most natural in the settings. Like, you don't really question, like he reacts to everything how you think he would react, and he just leads really well, and you can see why the director would take a liking to him and work with him in the future. And I think even Brad Pitt said, as you said before, that Gwyneth Paltrow was literally the only ray of sunshine in this whole film, and then the fact that gets wiped out as well is just, there's a fine line between being completely depressing and, it is an interesting film to say the least.
Yeah, it's a great 1995 for Kevin Spacey. He's not doing so great now, a bit of a controversial figure, but this year does Usual Suspects, which he wins Best Supporting Actor for the following year, and then a few months later, Se7en comes out, and no one knew that he was going to be in the film with the market at the time, and then he comes in as this like evil but very calculated, intelligent serial killer. Ross, did you enjoy his performance with not a lot of screen time, as Matty says, but he kind of delivers really impressively?
Yeah, like literally, he absolutely steals that kind of last 20 minutes of the film about that. He is so just like insane, and well, he's not even insane. That's the thing about it. He seems normal, but he's just not. And there's something that you kind of want to listen to him talk, but at the same time, you're like, no, he's crazy. And I think that's why he's so like interesting. And yeah, just kind of watching him, he's. I don't think anyone could have played that role better, really.
Mason mentioned the what's in the box scene as well. And I love the way that's shot with like the camera, like it's like jolting slightly. There's lots of quick cuts. It's kind of turning around. And Ross mentioned the score as well, which I thought like in that moment, like especially, it was just like incredible. Like the tension it builds, the like sickening feeling when you realize like what's going on. And I love the bit when he mentions like the child, like mentioned that she was pregnant, and that's when Morgan Freeman like loses it. Like he can't take it anymore. Like even he's trying to remain calm to stop Brad Pitt from shooting him. But in that moment when Spacey talks about her like dying with the child inside her, like that's when he slaps him. I really like that moment.
One thing that gets me every time I watch the film is the sloth death scene. Like when they find the guy for sloth, and he's just like on that bed, just like half dead, just pops up. It's so like creepy and disturbing, like that whole bit, and it's probably my favorite bit of the film. Like just to kind of be like creeped out by. Because even when they first go into the apartment, there's all car air freshener things hanging from the ceiling. Like, what the fuck is going on? And then he just pops up from the bed, like makes you jump every time. Yeah, I'd say that's my kind of pop out scene to me.
Yeah, it's literally like modern day like Jack the Ripper vibes with the film. That's what I find so disturbing about it, because you have to continuously watch all these fucked up scenes. And like what I find really effective is that they don't hesitate to show all these like murders, but like we said, with the last scene with the head in the box, they don't show you, and I think that makes it even more effective because you don't need to, because they build up so much tension with like all these camera angles from the helicopter and stuff like that, and everyone's acting on screen really. Yeah, it's just not needed, and I think it would almost take away from it if they did show us her head at that scene, because then you sort of be like, that would be the main thing on your mind rather than everything else playing out around it. So I have to like applaud the film and how well it sort of achieves a lot of the tension throughout, really.
Okay, let's get some Ratings. I'll start with you, Mason.
The first time I watched it, I really enjoyed it, so I gave it an 8.2.
Matty.
I gave it an 8.9.
Ross.
Yeah, I think it's some of the best screenwriting that you're gonna find. So an 8.5.
And I gave it an 8.8. Se7en's also a great movie for rain, I thought. And another great movie for rain is my pick, Unforgiven, from 1992. Retired Old West gunslinger William Money reluctantly takes on one last job with the help of his old partner Ned Logan and a young man, the Schofield Kid. Directed by Clint Eastwood and written by David Webb Peoples, starring Eastwood, Freeman, and Best Supporting Actor winner Gene Hackman. And like Million Dollar Baby, Eastwood lost Best Actor, but won Best Director, and the film won Best Picture with his final Oscar coming for Best Editing. Yeah, if I watched this film, I think it was earlier this year I watched it for the first time, and I'd been told by lots of people like this is probably Eastwood's best film in terms of like directing one of the better films of the 90s, and I don't think I was disappointed. I'm rewatching it. I was like, okay, yeah, this is really, really good. Like it's another kind of similar to Old Country. Like the plot's not too complicated, relatively simple. They're just going to find these guys to try and take them out. But there's like a lot of deeper themes around it, and it's kind of a Western, but deconstructing the myths about the West with like, yeah, you don't usually see like poor shooting in Westerns, and the violence, none of the violence is like stylized. And then you never have in a Western like someone moralizing about whether it's right to kill, because you got the Schofield Kid, like he's regretful as soon as he kills the guy for the first time, like he immediately regrets it. Like it kind of confronts what it's like to actually murder someone in this film, which is what I thought was interesting. I hadn't really seen in other Westerns. And like yeah, there's no glory in the murder throughout. And I thought it was just a nice way for Eastwood to like end his association with Westerns, having done so many in his career, to go out on something that's kind of looking like breaking down the myths of the West. It's interesting, like Eastwood's characters I find interesting because he wants to do this to make a bit of money to support his family and set them up for the rest of his life. But at the same time, it's kind of betraying his deceased wife, because he said that he'd never go back to that life. He keeps saying that quote, it's like a, yeah, I ain't like that no more. Like he keeps reiterating that, but he's straying back into that life. And even though it's for a good reason, I guess, to try and make money, because he's kind of struggling. You see him at the start struggling on this farm, like rolling in the mud, trying to control these pigs who I think they had like fever or something. So he's doing it for honorable reasons, but it's still not, maybe not what his wife would have wanted. English Bob, I find him to be a really funny character, played by Richard Harris, the original Dumbledore. I thought he just killed it. Like he comes in insulting America for not having a monarch, and then you've got Little Bill, Gene Hackman, who I think is like the real star of this film. Obviously wins the Oscar. Like he kind of, after English Bob's like saying, yeah, you don't have a monarch, you see Little Bill, who kind of commands like the respect of like a king or a dictator. Like he rules in this town with fear, like it's only his rules. Like no one else can have a weapon when they come in, but they'll have the weapons and they'll like enforce violence whenever they want to. I thought that was quite interesting. And like I mentioned, why this film was so strong to me mainly is because like it's just a film about conversations about life in the West, but the script is just so like on point. Like kind of reminded me of The Hateful Eight in that sense. Like, and again, Hateful Eight's just in one room, which isn't the same for this film, but that's just another really like sound script, just really good conversations, interesting conversations that like force you to reflect on certain things. And it's a testament to the screenplay that no changes were made to the original work by the screenwriter, like which is basically unheard of in Hollywood. Like there's always like little changes here, maybe the director will make a change or two, but it was completely unedited, which I thought was testament to that. Obviously, this is Morgan Freeman week, not a massive role for him, but I thought his best moment was when I mentioned how they show people who aren't good at shooting, which is unusual for a Western, and his scene when he realizes he can't shoot, like he's trying to take out the guy, and then at one point he's just like, I think he says all he says is Will, like with a bit of anguish in his voice, because he just doesn't know what to do. Like he's not as good a marksman as he was back in the day. So yeah, I think I had a few negatives, but I'll leave it there for now. I think no one else had seen this film previously. May, what did you make of it watching it for the first time?
Yeah, I hadn't seen it at all, so I didn't really know what to make of it. Going into it when he was struggling to shoot the can, I was half like I couldn't really tell if this was a comedy or not. So I was just interested to kind of explore that a bit more. I think some of the more powerful, as you said, Richard Harris's performance in it was really good. And then seeing his like confrontation with Gene Hackman, I think with a little bit of change of direction, Gene Hackman could be made the hero of this story, because like he has a point in what he's trying to do. It's just the way he goes about it might be a little bit, you know, counterintuitive, but more or less, like I think in his eyes, violence breeds violence, and him not allowing the prostitutes to then have this man killed, it would just instill more gang rivalry and more killing, and that's exactly what it did. But he perpetuated that himself, so it's kind of an interesting thing to look about. Um, some of my favorite parts was kind of like the realization of Morgan Freeman's death was off screen, and that was really quite nice. Like the idea, like something that hits quite hard for me usually in films is things once they're done and they can't go back, and that when they were happening, you weren't even aware that they were happening. It's not even like they were trying to stop it and they couldn't. It had just happened. And when that happens in a film, same with Se7en with Gwyneth Paltrow's head, it's just really quite a powerful thing to do. And then also the realization at the end of the film, because it's always alluded to what Eastwood had done in his past, but he never said what he'd done. And then when it said he's killed women, he's killed children, he'd killed countless people, and like he had no regret and he was drunk all the time. And you see that realization coupled with him just without really pointing it out, you realize he started to drink quite a lot straight away, and you realize, okay, things are gonna heat up now. And that's when I started to warm a bit more to the film, because like most of the film, I realized it was just laying the scene for what would be the return of this character that's only been alluded to. So I was being patient with it, but it didn't really grip me until then. And there were some interesting quotes, like Gene Hackman saying, "I don't deserve this," and him replying with, "Deserve's got nothing to do with it." And yeah, the ending tying it together for me, it worked well. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite Clint Eastwood film. I've seen a fair few, and it was nice to see him acting in this, and then also in contrast with Million Dollar Baby, and then from what I'd seen in like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I think he trades the hats of the different characters at different stages quite well.
Yeah, Eastwood's an interesting director. Like his nickname's One Take Clint because he just comes in just most of the time. Like he won't even do an extra shot. It's just one shot. We're done. He always gets his films like under budget, and all the films always make money. So even if you don't love him, like he's made some really good films, some average films. But even if you don't love him as like a creative filmmaker, like as an economical filmmaker, like it's pretty impressive what he's able to do. And you mentioned that the idea of Gene Hackman's character being like the hero of the film. Like I probably agree, really. Like he probably has the most honor of anyone in this film, and that's kind of shown because Eastwood's character, like by the end, he's back to his old self essentially. And I think that final showdown was like one of the few things that didn't work for me. Like I thought they could have executed that final showdown a bit better. I don't know, like the way he's able to get his shot off, it like it just looked a bit. It was just awkwardly staged. I thought, like, yeah, I don't know what it was. I don't know how they could have made it better, but even then, like, and the violence, that's the only time the violence feels a bit like Hollywoody. Is that something you thought, Ross? Like they could have done that, and that final showdown where he's got to take down the guy who's been like the antagonist, Gene Hackman. He's trying to take him down in this final scene, which may be like a big moment. Like I thought it could have been done a bit better.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It does feel very, like Hollywoody. It's just kind of like the whole film is relatively calm up to that point. Obviously, there's a lot of guns and stuff before then, but that's the only real time you see like just kind of bullets flying around everywhere. And I think it kind of puts a dent in the tone of the film. But apart from that, I did enjoy it. And one thing I did really, really enjoy in this film, I think, is this is probably Eastwood's best character, his most well-developed character. I mean, it's almost as if it's him and him looking back on his Hollywood career and playing those characters that he played in, say, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but when he's older, it's almost as if he's kind of portraying them. And as you said, it's like an end to his Western career. But yeah, it's really like refreshing to see a Western film where he's kind of flawed and aware of the negativity that he's causing, and like the Schofield kid who comes along wants to be like his like good the Mario character, but he when like the harsh reality settles in, he realizes it's it's not the right path for him to go down, and it's really refreshing to see a Western film that does that. And yeah, but as you said about that film, it does kind of it's a tonal shift within the film, which I think didn't work, but it's still a good film. Yeah.
I thought they could have fucked up the prostitute that got mangled by the guy after she called his dick small. Like, I thought they could have fucked up her face a bit more. They always do that in films. Like Matty, you know, in Mortal Engines, like you said, her scar should have been much worse. Like this one, like she's not even that ugly. Like it's just a few like scratches. Like I thought they could have fucked up her face a bit more. And she's not a great actress as well.
Yeah, it is jarring when they do that. It's all, I think they referred to her saying she's got no face left. She's hideous. No one's going to want to fuck her and all this rubbish. When you look at her and she's literally just got like tiny little nicks. When he in the film, he was literally just gashing at her face, and it's annoying when they do this. Like I don't understand what they're trying to prove, especially with a film like this. I thought Clint would know better. And interesting that when he originally got the script, it was called Whore's Gold, which is an interesting take on it. And I like that they've changed the name to Unforgiven. It makes you think more about the meaning behind what they're doing and what they can't forget and the regret.
Another performance, but I wasn't like 100% sold on, was the guy who played the Schofield kid. Like, I mentioned Brad Pitt a few times on this podcast, and I felt that was another like role that would have been really suited to him. Like that kind of a bit of a hothead, but really that arrogant, thinks he's better than he is. And ultimately has that like emotional moment when he actually does kill someone and realizes, I don't want to do that in my life. I thought someone like a better actor could have carried that well, even though it was still fine, it's still effective. I thought a better actor could have carried that more better. Mason, what do you think of his performance?
Yeah, like you said, he offers this sort of like childish perspective on the whole thing, and he I think because of the script he does that really well, because he's allowed to like pretend he's killed all these people before, roll with it, and then like you said, have this sort of switch around where he realizes it's not a life for him. But I think there could have just been a bit more emotion from that actor, and that's where I think he's offered such a good character arc, but it's just not executed in the best way. I don't think it's sort of like, I really appreciate the way that he's shown to be clumsy, like even to the silly things where he tries to shoot the wrong toilet at first and then almost gets like shot himself, but then has to go into the second one, shoots the guy, then they run off. But the whole sort of change of his sort of perspective on not wanting to be a cowboy is like that sort of like persona it just feels a bit weak, really. And like I said, I think you can only sort of lie that down with the actor that was chosen. Because for me, like one of the strongest points of the film is that it sort of offers more of a human tone to a Western. Because like in my head, I look at Westerns as almost being like back in like the 1900s, like especially like with that era of film, they were like their equivalent to like superhero films. Because you have always like, you have the sheriff, you have stuff like that. They have like all the action that a modern superhero film offers, with like the main character being sort of the hero. But this film offers sort of like a modern day perspective where everyone has a voice within the film. And like we said, with sort of the prostitutes getting all their money together to put a bounty on those guys' heads, it's something that almost seems sort of strange in the film, because you're not used to watching a Western where women have a voice or have enough power to execute something like that. So I think that's sort of the biggest thing I took away from the film, is that they was able to add this sort of human level to a Western film and be effective at the same time.
So I'll start with my rating. I've given this an 8.5. Mason?
Like I said, I really enjoyed sort of what the film achieves, but there was just a fair few issues that I had with it, and it felt quite long, especially compared to Shawshank, which is, I think, a longer film, but feels considerably shorter. So I gave it a 7.9.
Matty?
I kind of struggled with the film in that I had to give it a lot of time for it to achieve what it wanted to achieve, and I had to genuinely look for the like the moments that I thought that's what it's building up to. I had to like kind of look for that and give it my own meaning. So I gave it a 7.3, and then also agreeing with you on how they were when he drew on the guys in the whorehouse, and then all the guys like took ages to shoot back. That could have been done better, but that's not because of my rating.
Ross?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Matty and Mason on this one. Sometimes, as Matty said, you kind of have to look for them kind of pivotal moments within the film, say. I gave it a 7.8.
Okay, now let's rank the 4 films for this week. Gonna start with you, Matty.
For me personally, I think Se7en, then Shawshank Redemption, then Unforgiven, then $1 Million Baby.
Mason.
I think what I enjoyed this week was that I hadn't seen 3 out of 4 of the films, so I could kind of go in with like an open perspective to all of them. So I've got Shawshank first, then at second I've got $1 Million Baby, at third I've got Se7en, and then at fourth I've got Unforgiven.
Ross.
I think Shawshank is just such an elite film. You can't not put that at first. But then after that, I've got Se7en, then third $1 Million Baby, then fourth Unforgiven.
And I've got Shawshank first, Se7en second, Unforgiven third, and $1 Million Baby fourth. Okay, and in terms of our average ratings for this week, at number 1, we've got Shawshank at a 9. Number 2, Se7en with an 8.6. Third, Unforgiven, fourth $1 Million Baby, but they're both a 7.9. What do we think's better? Unforgiven.
$1 Million Baby.
$1 Million Baby.
I was about to say Unforgiven, but yeah. $1 Million Baby.
So we have $1 Million Baby at 3 and Unforgiven at 4. In that case, is $1 Million Baby better than Moneyball? No.
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 Nope.
Is it better than Natural Born Killers? No.
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 Is it better than I, Tonya? No.
Wait, what film are we talking about?
$1 Million Baby.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No.
No.
All right, calm. There it goes. So in terms of how these films fit in, we have a new number 1. Shawshank goes above Wolf of Wall Street with a 9. Also knocks American Beauty out of the top 5, which is nice. Then making up the top 5 as well, we've got Se7en, which goes in at number 4 with that 8.6. Then at number 25, we have $1 Million Baby with that 7.9. Also in a 7.9 is Unforgiven, which is at 26. Okay, moving on to our actor of the week, which would be a bit harsh if it wasn't Morgan Freeman, but interested if anyone wanted to pick an alternative actor to him. I'll start with you, Ross.
I mean, Morgan Freeman would be the obvious choice, but I think I wanted to go with this person just because Clint Eastwood over the years has just played Western characters. So in this role, he just slips right into it, and he is so perfect in kind of like saying goodbye to the genre. So I felt like I really wanted to pick Clint Eastwood, just to kind of, because it was his goodbye to the genre, and it's just kind of a beautiful story that he wanted to tell, a beautiful story in his character's perspective that he wanted to tell, I think. So I put Clint Eastwood.
May?
I went for Kevin Spacey.
Interesting. Mason?
I went for Hilary Swank in $1 Million Baby. I just really enjoyed her performance in that. And I think she sort of does that whole like underdog story really well in that film. It was just quite easy for me to choose, really.
And I went for Tim Robbins in Shawshank. Just thought he was really, really effective and not giving away an awful lot about what he was thinking whilst being a symbol of hope. Okay. Kevin Garnett Award for a sports person who could successfully transition into acting and be in this movie in honor of KG's performance in Uncut Gems. Ross, I'll start with you.
So as Frankie Dunn, which is Clint Eastwood's character in $1 Million Baby, I put Sir Alex Ferguson there. I mean, he's just a great manager and he knows how to look after his players, but at the same time, sometimes you can't really understand what he's saying because of his accent. So yeah, I thought I'd throw him in there.
Nice. May?
I would replace in Shawshank Redemption Tommy with Craig Rutherford because I have a feeling he'd probably lose his head, say something he shouldn't, and then get shot. But there we go.
I feel like it's the second time he's used Craig Rutherford, but calm. Mason?
So Lamella for Spurs has always made me feel really uncomfortable when I see him like on the pitch. I think it must be his jaw. Like he's kind of one of those characters that looks like he's been dead for a few years. So I've replaced him in Se7en as I think it's Sloth, the one you said, who's been like basically dead for a year on the bed and then comes back to life for like a few minutes. Yeah, I think looks wise, I think it's a perfect casting.
I'm sure Eric will take that as a compliment. I've gone for. Obviously, I wanted to replace the actor who played the skillful kid, ideally with Brad Pitt, but looking at his category, I thought go with that sportsman who's notorious for being arrogant. So I've gone for Nicholas Bentner. He'll capture that vibe perfectly. And now, when we and Ross choose a different one, that's what all our listener has been waiting for. The I wish this was the Pop Vinyl Award. Ross, what have you gone for?
For this week, I've gone with. I feel like you wouldn't have picked this, but you might have. Kevin Spacey when he walks into the police. Oh, you actually have picked it. Fuck's sake. Kevin Spacey, but at the bit where he walks into the police station with the white suit with the blood all over it, I thought that would make a great pop vinyl. But it seems as if you picked Kevin Spacey as well. So, fuck's sake.
My note was John Doe, blood on hands. So yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah, again. Tune in next week to see. Tune in next week to see if we aren't the same person. Yeah, again. So that's it for this week. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Corona Cinema and check out our website, coronacinemapodcast.wordpress.com, where our terrible opinions live in written form. We're on Spotify, Google, Stitcher, all the popular podcast apps. Next week, we're doing LGBTQ movies because it's LGBTQ month in June. And it's officially June because we've gone past midnight. And the films we're doing, Call Me By Your Name, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Moonlight, and Brokeback Mountain. Until then, go well.
Cheers.
Cheers.
How do we feel about separating the artist from the work?
Yeah.
You say yeah.
Yeah.
I say yeah, pretty much. Like, yeah.
Okay, you're going for yeah.
Mason?
What's the question?
Separating the artist from the work?
What does that mean? So like you can't direct and be in the film?
This bit's good at the end of the podcast.